Nice. All right. So for today's session, we have with us the wonderful Kiran, who is a community leader feeding thousands of families in East London with her kitchen. And as we spoke about it, she's formed part of the creative heartbeat of London with her creative designs and dance moves at various jazz gigs around town. I'm not sure if the pandemic's come in your way, Kiran, but from what I've heard about you, you seem quite unhindered in your ways. So yeah, the floor is yours.
Hello. Where to start? So it's called Drive, Compassion, and it says creation, but I think creativity. I think for me, I wanted to look at the idea of drive, why people are driven. And I think sometimes you look at people and you think, oh my gosh, that person's really driven. And for me, a lot of the time, we're trying to heal something. A lot of people are very driven or feel a sense of being driven. There's a healing within it. My background is, I suppose, from an early age, the world around me wasn't a world that I was feeling nourished by. And so I started to find creativity. I had an art teacher who I had a teacher when I was 9 who basically, when I came into school, if I finished all my work, would let me draw. And then I ended up being able to draw over the walls and then be able to get assistants to help me draw. And we never talked about anything. We never talked about anything that I might have been going through as a child. But what he taught me continuously was how to transform energy. And it only at a later stage, I was like, they're tools of transformation. Creativity are tools of transformation. How you can get given an energy and how you can make it into something else. So I suppose my background is in art. So my background is in creating, I suppose, beauty in spaces. But from the beginning of my career, it was about how to share tools of transformation with other people. It's like, how can you find ways to show other people, like, oh, this is how you can make your mark, or this is how you can change things. I think a lot of us inhabit a reality that doesn't resonate with us. Like, we're a little bit confused sometimes. You're like, the child in me is confused when I go out into spaces where I sort of feel a little bit like, this is not what I envisage. So what creativity does is allows you to express that, and sometimes to, if only for a moment, to change that energy. So everybody is feeling something else. They're connected in a different way. So initially, I studied illustration. And so I started drawing on spaces. So I suppose it's sort of like you take a line and you make something else. You make people be able to see things and look at and observe things in a different way. It's a very easy way to get people to see a different reality. And then that became things I did in public spaces. So I did lots of stuff in children's hospitals. At one point, I was transforming mental health spaces. And with that, it was very much about, when you inhabit a space, the space is having a conversation back with you. And sometimes some spaces tell you that you shouldn't be there, you're not worthy of being there, or hospitals sort of tell you that you don't really matter. A lot of the time, a hospital is sort of saying, I don't have time to listen to you, actually. Can you just be there? So it's the idea of like changing spaces to actually connect more. Especially, I was doing loads of stuff in young people's mental health spaces. For me personally, if I went into your space and I wanted to talk about myself, there might be lots of different ways I want to communicate, which isn't sitting opposite you and making eye contact. That's very disempowering a lot of the time when you're the person that's being the vulnerable person. in a space. So it was finding ways of getting people to be able to draw on walls or sit in different ways, or it's just ways of creating space that care, a space that cares about you. And then that moved on to, in my spare time, I actually used to go to Passing Clouds. So Passing Clouds was my second home. And if people don't know about it, it was a community space in Dalston that was also, I suppose for some people, they saw it as a club, but it had lots of alternative ways of seeing things and lots of people connected in that space. So I started helping run a day called People's Kitchen on Sundays. And what we used to do is we take surplus food and anybody could come and anybody could cook together. And within that, it was creating a space where you observe that anybody can be a teacher and a student. It's fluid and you're allowed to sort of move from one or the other. And also with food, that's really simple. You sort of like, you can decide to chop food, or you can be the person that leads a dish, or you can just wash up, or you know the rhythms of creating a meal, so you can find your space within it. And then the way we worked was we worked with surplus, we improvised, and then we created a huge feast. I think for 5 years, I sort of just did this because I really wanted a space that you could just go by yourself. You didn't have to be extroverted. You didn't have to speak the language. And we basically hold space. So part of that holding space is I know how to cook for lots of people just by myself if I wanted to, but that isn't the point. The point is to hold space, to just sort of like pull a little bit out of other people, to get them to sort of understand that they can lead something, whether it's a dish or whether it's how the table is set, or and People's Kitchen was always something I just did in my spare time. So I never really believed it was me. I was just thought like, I'm just sort of I'm helping sort of, I used to say I'm the guardian of this space. So I'm the guardian of this space. And it's an invitation for us to be with each other in a way that I would like us as human beings to be with each other. And then at a certain point, it started sort of blending into my public artwork. So I suppose now they call it placemaking. So my placemaking work, at one point in Barking, we did like 500 meters of artwork around the town centre. And then I just thought, this is so weird. Like what I'm doing actually is making a divide pretty. So like each of those, where the artworks were just spaces where new flats were going to be built. So it's like, actually what I'm doing is there's a border that's being created and I'm making the border pretty. And how do I feel about that? And so I decided to make something in the middle of the town square that connected everyone, that was for free. So I had this random idea to make a pallet pavilion, a space that was made out of all the surplus from the building sites, and to make something that looked like a deck of a ship. And it was just the maddest idea ever. I think initially I just went from place to place talking this idea into life. And I think when you're driven, sometimes you don't actually know all the answers, you just know it's going to happen. So you just sort of go like, I'm going to make something which is the opposite of something I made before. Instead of something beautiful that just divides everyone, I'm going to make something in the middle of the town square that's made out of stuff that people wouldn't find important, that they would throw away. And within that space, I'm going to create a way of us to connect with each other. So what would happen is, it lasted for 8 weeks over summer holidays. On the sail of the ship was all the things that would happen each day. So it'd be like, we've got youth yoga, or we've got a film, or and it, like, I say it like it was really simple. It took every single piece of me to like make this thing come to life. Because basically, yeah, asking people in power to be able to change the middle of their town square is pretty difficult. So because I'd done a lot of other work with them, it was a little bit easier. It's really hard to talk about things and not show you like, this is the picture, this is the thing. But you can look on the website and look at it later.
Your hands are doing great jobs of illustrating the picture. It's better than a picture would, 100%.
Thing. And so it was, I think we made it, I think it was like 500 pallets. There were 500 pallets. It looked like a deck of a ship. At one point, we did an outdoor cinema. And I suppose, I don't know, okay, if it was me listening to this, I'd be like, how did you do this? I just talked about it all the time to play in places and sort of go like, I went to sort of like town meetings and they talked about buildings. And I was sort of saying, everybody's talking about buildings, like buildings are the answer to everything. But you have all these disused buildings and you don't let us occupy them and you don't let us put energy into the building and activate it. Because once you activate the space, what you want, which is money, will eventually happen, because energy has to come. Like when the energy comes first and that connection, then it will become vibrant and then more people will be connected with it and other stuff will happen from it. And it just so happened that in one of those meetings, there was someone who they were a property developer, and this old guy who looked like he could be in like the House of Lords sort of had a meeting with me, and he sort of said, what's your idea? And I told him my idea, and he sort of said to me, Kiran, the thing is, lots of people have money, but not many people have ideas. Don't underestimate the power of your ideas. And then he said he'd give me £10,000 towards this project. So that's like how it sort of came to life. I suppose I'm talking about this project because it was actually like a little ecosystem that was created, which made me sort of think about, we had community feasts there, we had jams there. I didn't actually sort of name it that much, but people started calling it the ship, because I just thought there should be magic in your day. You should turn up to something and not know what it is. There shouldn't always be like this huge sort of like signage and this is this and you do this in it and this is where you go and this is how you occupy the space. That we deserve to have magic in our day, to sort of just stumble upon something and find ways to connect you with it. At one corner of it, I had like a growing space, an edible space, and we grew corn. And I remember this gentleman walking past, seeing it and being really impacted, and then telling me about, you know, where he came from and cornfields. And I suppose I wanted to create those sort of connections. And from that, I think after I did the palette pavilion, I think I just had this whole like empty space afterwards. What happens a lot of time when you're creative, you sort of create something and it means so much to you, and then afterwards there's this flat space where you just don't know what to do next. And things like food projects, so people might have seen me in like Church of Sound or other places, they're just things I randomly ended up doing. I think for about 3-4 years I was doing lots of stuff with food but never telling anybody about it. When they go like, what do you do? I'd be like, I do creative projects. So it took me a long time to really understand why I'm really drawn to food. My background is Sikh, and in the Gurdwara, in the Sikh temple, there's langar. So there's a space where anybody can come and eat together. And traditionally, everybody sits on the floor. And the whole idea about it is a space where you meet each other on a level. And in some ways that really resonates with me, the idea of like food being something that connects people. I think if you cook with someone, you can really disagree about lots of different things, but by the time you've cooked and eaten together, there's some connection somewhere. Like you don't have to have the same belief system. There's something in you that sort of like you fed each other. when the pandemic happened, I suppose like, how, like, it's weird when you like randomly monologuing, but why am I driven? I am driven because I have a fire inside me. And I suppose we're in a country where everybody tells you to be like water, but some of us really, really needed our fire to be able to survive here, to be able to still exist in a way that honored ourselves. So that fire, that drive is some of it is a crisis response. I grew up in crisis, so a lot of it is trying to make things better. I've got like my past experience is this idea of wanting to make things better. So that drive is this sense of urgency of like, oh, wait a minute, I don't feel safe in this space. I want to make it better. How do I do that? How do I make it in a way that isn't just better for me, but it's better for lots of other people as well? And this idea of being of service, I think you can change spaces, and that's a skill unto itself. But if you enable people to have tools so they feel like there's a part of them that's creating the change, then it isn't about you. It's about, you're just a vessel that's trying to sort of explain to others, like, this is our public space. We're allowed to change it. Like, we're allowed to, or this is the city we live in. We're allowed to make changes within it. We have people power. And I suppose I'm driven to not just make it connect better, but to make spaces where other people feel empowered and nourished, and we're responding to things. When the pandemic happened, I think some of us who are used to crisis can get a little bit too drawn up in crisis. It's like you head towards it, you're like, wow, crisis is happening. And some of us, not that we feel safe in crisis, but it's like the rhythm of your heartbeat changes. You feel a calmness where everybody else is feeling a panic. You feel this sense of like, oh, everything's up in the air. I know how this feels when everything's up in the air. What do I do first? Or what happens next? So what we did was I opened up a community centre down the road because an organisation asked me if we could cook for, there are lots of people who don't have recourse to funds, and they're from different boroughs, and each borough has its own system of how to get people food. And I was like, this is just so, like, it's easy. People want food, just give people food. It's not that complicated. So we opened up our community centre down the road, which has got a commercial kitchen, and we started cooking in the space and improvising. I think we got to a point where we were making like 650 meals a day, 2 days a week. And it's this weird thing at the moment. We're in this climate where everybody talks about numbers, like, I've done this or this, but it was more sort of like improvising food that, okay, initially we wanted to give food to the Kingsmead estate. Kingsmead estate is full of really proud people that are going to definitely say no to food. So I was just like, how do we win people over? And there was an auntie in my block of flats who I know cooks for the church. So I asked her to come and make jollof rice. And I was like, I'm going to win everybody over with jollof rice. And so that's what we did initially. It's the idea of sort of making food that understands who you are and where you're from. Because what happens a lot, especially in terms of emergency food response, people are giving you stuff that actually doesn't communicate with your sense of food. Is like home and nourishment and culture and comfort and so many other things. So what I really wanted us to do was create food that when you opened up the food, you felt like somebody really cared. You felt like it was a blessing. We ended up making packs which had 6 packs of food, So there'll be something sweet, something that was some sort of curry, something that was very, very plain if you had a very plain palate, or children with a very plain palate. And then we connected with lots of other groups. So we connected with the youth centre, and the young people would deliver this food. The reason behind this was, I sort of think, if you want to embed yourself in community, then lots of people should be allowed to make their mark and create a change. Otherwise, all you're doing is just making your own decision of how things should be in a space. So the young people would deliver the food to their neighbours. And then what started happening is we decided to make a Young Leaders Fund, because we just thought, actually, our young people are leaders. There was this this young, astounding young man called Femi, who's a filmmaker. And he turned up, and I was just like, actually, if I supported you, you would be able to change so much for so many young people in this neighborhood. So what support do you need? So Joycelyn, who runs the youth centre, runs an organisation called Rise 365. We made a crowdfunder called the Young Leaders Fund to talk about equity and lack of equity, and a lack of generational support, and what that leaves you as a young person if you're not on the level playing field to other people. I think we raised like 20,000, which bought computers, and for Femi, for his organisation ACP Network, brought them cameras, and now he runs something called the Young Creators. So he's teaching lots of young people about filming, and within that he's talking about who gets to tell a story of what's happening, like who gets to be the person that says what's happening, and it's who gets to make their mark. And from that we've moved on to make it into a social supermarket. The reason for that was for people to have more autonomy over their food. I think last week we had like 225 families come to collect food. It's great food. Like, it's basically abundance. We have like a bag of root vegetables like sweet potatoes, plantain, carrots, onions, but we just did salads. A lot of it is fresh stuff. And the idea was the same thing, that you get this shopping which you pay £5 for, that you sort of like gives you this sense of like abundance. And then at the moment what we're about to do is open our own space at the Thames Barrier Park. So that space will be called the Made Up Cafe, and it's looking at the possibility of making self-sustaining models. Like, can we have a space where people come in, they buy food and buy other bits and pieces, and from the profits of that we support community? Because applying for grant funding or applying for things from other people is it's just difficult. It's difficult if you come from a grassroots sort of space and you don't want to ask in the way that you'll be given. So the way that the models that we have in this country are this idea of like aid. So like, you act as if you're the people that are going to do this great thing and everybody else is in need, and you create these words which are really horrible, disadvantaged, like just really not great words. And then from that, you get money. You talk about how you're alleviating poverty or this or that. And I mean, grant funding is quite hard. So it was this idea of, can we have a space that we can actually see if we can create our own finances? And I suppose it's been really horrible couple of years trying to work. It's difficult to try to work in spaces you haven't worked before. If you like, I'm used to working under a sense of like systems of authority that inhabit us, find little sort of ways of finding buildings or spaces and sort of activating them. So this space in the Royal Docks is the opposite. It's a beautiful space. It's run by the council, and suddenly I'm occupying space and having to interact with people from authority and to answer in ways that I don't know how to answer. I'm really good at being responsive and creative and having visions of things, but financial projections and business plans and all these other things are sort of like, I can do them, but they don't resonate. And I suppose the whole like bigger vision, the bigger vision is our city is being developed, and what's happening is we're being erased out of these spaces. And the we is lots of different people, whether you're creative or whether you come from the diaspora, or we're being erased. And as much as I can sort of sit and go and complain about it and sort of go like, London used to be like this, or I just sort of think, I don't have the energy. I have an energy to try to create some sort of change. And I suppose with the Made Up Cafe, it's around a lot of developments. And a part of me thought, it's a stage. And on this stage, we can show how we can be different with each other. And on this stage, a lot of people from a lot of developers and other groups can observe us. And a lot of them want kudos points. And they will then come to us. And then we can start looking at developments and how you can change how community is in developments and how you communicate. It's really weird doing monologues. Sort of like, I'm so used to
seriously, Kiran, there's like such a fire running through me. You're like, I'm pretty sure others feel the same, where like I'm in awe. But yeah, if anybody else wants to.
I think I'm so used to communicating with people, so to communicate at is a really bizarre concept. And I think, yeah, today I was thinking, like, how much do you tell people that you don't know about? I think I said to James, is this going out somewhere? Because I was just like, actually, people are maps, like their journeys are maps through spaces. And a lot of us just tell each other like, oh, this is what it's like to be here. But we don't really tell each other how we got here or how to get to the next thing. And so then you just have this really, and I suppose social media does that as well. It gives you a really elevated sense, like, I'm here, it's great. Or like, you just sort of go, how did you get here? And I suppose a lot of times when people are sort of commending me about things, I sort of think, I'm driven because I'm trying to heal something. I'm driven because there's a part of me that as a child couldn't fix things. And so I'm trying to, on a bigger stage, fix things. And I'm sort of learning within that I don't need to do it from a sense of crisis. Like, I can do it from a space of calm. It's pretty difficult. I'm nowhere near there because I have this urgency, like, everything is messed up, quick. It's this sort of thing of like, everyone, quick, we haven't got time. We really got to sort this out. So it's hard to try to do it in a calmness. But I think that if we keep on creating things from struggle and just from struggle, then I think we're not completely in our power. There's a part of us that knows how to do things. I think the difference is like, how do you get to be allowed to do things? How do you get to be allowed to change spaces or make your mark on spaces or open up a building or do your project or like, and I think that's where we get confused, because we keep on thinking we have to ask, and we're asking people and systems that don't understand we exist or don't really understand anything about us. So it's like you're communicating a different language to people, like they're not going to really hear you. So I suppose I would say to people now more than ever, I know it feels crap, like I really do. I know it feels like there's a level of fatigue, and there's a level of exhaustion, and there's a level of like, yeah, most of us haven't had the things that feed us and nourish us, whether it's being with friends or dancing or being in spaces, that vibrance or that connection, just touching skin. Most of us haven't had that, and so it can feel like it's a lot. And I think a lot of times people communicate from a sense of like how difficult it is, because you want somebody else to understand. Like some days I'm in a tornado and I want other people to know, like, I'm in a tornado. Quick, what does your tornado look like? But I think when everything sort of comes to land, it means that we can build again, sort of like when the tornado is done. And I think a part of me is starting to open up to the idea of like, what do we want to build? Like, how do we want to be together? Like, how do we want to connect? And how do we do that? And in a way, when everything's messed up, it's more people will want to be different. So therefore, you've got more allies. You've got more people that are looking for something beyond like financial gain to connect with each other. So that's my sort of like call to arms. Got this.
That was great. That was incredible, Kiran. I won't put you through the torture of long monologue. We'll get people involved. I want to start with something that's actually been burning inside of me, which is like, this is no offense to everyone, but I feel everyone who says, oh, I can't wait back to get to a club or get back to spaces, I feel like they're the same people who didn't like use the spaces. And I know it's a harsh thing to say, but I feel like there's a lack of creativity in us thinking our power was in spaces before. It wasn't. It was never in the spaces. It was within the people who did something in that space. And yeah, I didn't think of saying that until like, yeah, you just ignited something in me. So thank you for that. If Kiran has ignited something in you, feel free to start speaking.
We could just have a conversation.
I really resonated with what you said about, well, tons of things. I've actually taken notes, and I guess a few things, right? You spoke about spaces and their fluidity and connecting with them. And then you said, you know, it's not about, one of the things that hold us back is that we always feel this need to ask, right? Like, it's always like, is it okay if I, you know, do this? And you kind of go back and forth. While at the same time forgetting that the real things that we need to communicate with is not people, but the spaces in themselves. Has it been intuitive for you? Because you've mentioned this yourself, right? Like, you hear these stories and people talk about it in retrospect, and it sounds like, you know, it was an easy, smooth journey. Like, you found these things and suddenly it all pieced together. But how has this process been for you? You know, how did these things come your way? Did you have moments where you just felt, I don't see this going anywhere, there's no direction, and then suddenly someone came in, or did it just all flow?
It's always really difficult. Like, it's sort of like there's one part of you that's really driven. So there's one part of me that's driven that just sort of goes, this is definitely 100% going to happen. Like, there is no choice here. And then there is my anxiety, which creates barriers all over the place, which just sort of goes, you're not good enough. You have no idea what you're doing. You have no clue. Why did you even think this is going to happen? Like, why would somebody let you do this? And there's I would say like 85% of my energy is spent fighting myself. And I think that comes from maybe, I suppose it's sort of like, we don't know our power, and we don't know our power because maybe we grew up in this society not being told that we're disempowered. And so therefore it's sort of like there is this constant, and you're talking to people who also, not necessarily that they don't know your power. It's like you're not speaking the same language as them. You're not from the same background. You don't know. So you're in spaces where you don't know how to start communicating. So I think a lot of the time, my drive is just this sense of like, oh no, it's definitely happening. Part of me is like, this is 100% happening. Like with the Palette Pavilion, oh my gosh, I cried so many times. I was constantly like in this sense of like, am I really going to be able to have like a 200 square meter space in the middle of a town that like, is this allowed? Because I'm doing it, like it's happening. And every day I used to turn up through the summer, and me and the kids all hung out, and we used to just sort of like, it was like, today we're doing youth yoga, tomorrow we'll have a jam in the space, the next day we're going to have a community feast, because we can, because it's a public space. And like, as long as I do all the health and safety and risk assessment, do all the, like, we live in a risk adverse society. So as long as I speak your language and do all the random paperwork that makes this a viable option, then I'm doing what I want. So with things like, I really wanted to have an outdoor cinema and watch Life of Pi. I wanted us to be on a boat, watching a boat and embarking. A lot of the population are Indian, and they've just sort of like come from India. And I was just like, this would be really great. And so I figured out that there was a blow up cinema organization who used to be in Hackney, and they no longer had somewhere to put their shipping containers. So I knew that there were all these, which had all their equipment in them. I knew that Barking had all these developments that weren't going to be built. So there was free space. So I just sort of said, if they can put their shipping container on your land, for every year they do that, they'll give you 5 free events. So like, sorry, that was my dad calling. Basically, me and him have this thing where we talk about the yoga he's done today and other stuff. So with that, what happened was, I lost my trail of thought. Oh yeah, I wanted an outdoor cinema. So I said they'd get 5 free events. And I suppose sometimes when you don't come from money, you become really good at finding ways around things and trading in different ways. So I've sort of made my way in this world of like working around money. I would say, like at the moment, we're about to open a space in the middle of a pandemic. It's the most stupidest, maddest idea ever. Like I've spent 2 years totally like mentally distraught about this. And I think sometimes it's good to realize that however you're feeling inside, sometimes you're playing out an old story. So you're just playing out an old pattern. Like I grew up in instability and trying to fixing and making things better and not thinking I could achieve it. So now I get drawn to projects which feel like they're out of my reach. It's impossible for me to do. I don't think I can do it. I'm not good enough. So I actually play out my old story. And sometimes it's good to look at that, because actually a lot of the struggle isn't happening outside yourself. It's actually you're replaying out your own limitations into the world around you. And it's really easy to do as well. You just sort of go, this society, the system doesn't believe me, blah, blah, blah. But the truth of the matter is it's me. I don't really believe in me enough. Like, so this project, yeah, I spend most of my time panicking about it. We're about to open in April. I spent 6 months holding off opening because I know that we'd hemorrhage money. I have no clue what I'm doing, but I have all the clues. Like, so it's this mixture of two things. It's sort of like a part of you really knows how to do it, and a part of you is being told by everybody else, you've never done this before, you've got no clue, how are you going to do this, and they do lots of technical speak, and you just sort of think, oh no, financial projections. It's sort of like, what? Like, so I think I would sort of say to people, like, you don't actually ever have to be like, only certain people are that driven that they do these things. And it's not necessarily like those driven people are to be commended all the time. We really are a little bit, I think I had on a work ethic. I don't really have a work ethic because it's not work to me. It's just my life. I'd like to exist in a world where things are different. And so therefore I create the worlds that are different to inhabit and try to get as many other people to inhabit them. I suppose within this, for me, I would say to other people, find other people to connect with. Like, you're not actually alone in wanting things to be different. And too many of us stand alone. You sort of go like, this is my idea and I wanted it. It's sort of like, you're gonna burn out and you're gonna keep burning out. And the more you burn out, the more people won't be able to necessarily connect with you, because actually part of us, though we connect from struggle, we want to really connect from joy. It's easier to connect to somebody from joy. Like you want to be part of that thing, because there's something in you that feels like a childlike wonder, and that's why you want to be part of it, and you feel a value in it. So I would say, like, yeah, the more we do these sort of things, that we just connect with each other, other things will fall into place.
Yeah. What you said about connecting with joy just again took me back to the farmers' protest, right? Which, of course, there's struggle, but you saw people dancing and singing together, and there was, I saw that, and for a second I was worried that seeing them happy, would that trivialize their struggle in the face of media? Because a lot of it was actually going back to your idea that things almost draw people more when you see this idea of blatant suffering, and then it's phrased in a way of disadvantage, vulnerability, and then you have people dancing, and you wonder, will people connect with this, or do they want to see crying faces, right? But actually, you see the movement, you see people.
To me, I think we just live in a world that really resonates with these colonial models, where you just sort of go like one group is the group that gets it. I think we're doing it in our community center now, but it used to happen in people's kitchen and other spaces as well. It's like one group gets to be the givers, and as the givers, it's a very empowering role to be the giver of something. When the first lockdown happened, everybody wanted to be a giver. Like, everybody was like, I'm here, I didn't even have to have a skill set, I'm just giving. And that means that, like, and you sort of go, well, there's this real weird thing of like, you can be a giver, or you have to be the person who's really disempowered and receives. And that model of receiving just makes the givers more powerful. Like, you just like, it doesn't create change. It doesn't actually create, it's just basically feeding this, and it's not making this. And I suppose a lot of third sector organizations, they're trying to get funding, and so in that funding they have to still say that they're really needed, and to be needed, it means that somebody else has to really be in need. And that doesn't really connect with me. I sort of think, like, when we run the community shop, I would say 85% of the people that help run the space come from the estate, and we get the food ourselves as well. So it's not like we're just giving food to others, we're receiving food too. And that's a different energy when you're in a space together. I suppose it's sort of like understanding the value of those models and creating them is really important.
Yeah. That's, I think there's a strong balancing act involved in all of these things that you're saying, in terms of giving and receiving, but also you kind of navigating your own inner space, in terms of, realizing it's your own inner conflicts that actually impede a lot of what you want to do, while also being aware of the practicalities of the spaces you're working with. And then this idea of harnessing the power of ambiguity without getting stuck in old patterns of responding to crises. So it's very easy, at least the way I see it, to fall into that trap of, well, I responded to the crisis the last time by becoming a wreck, right? And so I'll probably do the same. It'll help me, do something, but in the end, it's toxic to me. And the fact that you kind of say, okay, what's a lesson I can learn, and what do I unlearn in terms of that pattern? All of that involves a lot of conscious balancing from what.
I think also it's this lockdown has allowed a lot of people to talk about their own mental health and anxiety and different things. I think I never thought I had anxiety. I just thought I was really proactive. I was like, I'm just really proactive. But it's like, actually, that proactivity comes from an energy within me that is finding it really difficult in the space that I'm in. It wants it to be different. It wants the space to be safer. And the best way I know how to do that is to create it myself and sort of go like, I'm creating this space. It connects better with me. I feel more nourished in it. And I feel like it's a better space for me and there for other people. I think sometimes people can get into this savior complex or this sort of like, which is really good to look at, because what happens if you end up being the person that's more important than the thing that you're doing? It means it's near on impossible for other people to replicate what you're doing, and that's what I don't want. I want like as many people as involved in different ways, so therefore each of those people will start doing something else and make something else, or can lead without me, and that takes a lot of belief, I suppose, to sort of like to be able to sort of try to create those spaces which have, I suppose, more opportunities for other people. In our community shop, we have people from the age of 13 to like 70, and the teenagers are really involved because of Rise 365 and this idea of sort of like you create the future by supporting young people have a different alternative, like of how they get to lead in a space, and also for them to see what service feels like and how supporting their community feels like in a way that isn't cliche, that isn't sort of like, so we've had for a year young people helping in the space. They come and they sort of like bag up, they make different decisions about stuff. A young person who does all the spreadsheets, and he's like 15, and he has different opinions. Like, so it's this idea of making spaces which allow us more people to have a voice in this sort of say. And I suppose within that all, you need to have like a mad person like me who just sort of like is sort of like really sort of like, sometimes I feel like I'm like this injured salamander that's sort of like circling things and protecting this thing. Like, I'm gonna really protect this thing. Like, we are not gonna be patronized. We are not gonna be like, you know, the young people make films about the space, and so they get to sort of communicate how we are seen and how we talk about ourselves. And I think that's a really good thing to look at. Who tells stories? I think for a long time, I wouldn't do anything like this, because I just sort of think, I think if you come from different cultures, you come from this sense of humility, and like something isn't you, it flows through you. Like, I grew up with the idea of what seva is, or being of service, or so you just sort of think, oh, if I'm like here, there's a little bit of meanness in it. Like, it's a bit like calling marbles Elgin marbles. You just sort of go, well, they're not the Elgin marbles. You stole those, and now you put your name on them. So there can be this feeling of like being the face or the name of something. But it's taken me a certain amount of time to realize that if you don't exist, then how do other people know that they can exist? It's like, if you don't sort of step up somewhere and sort of go like, oh, I've made this thing, this is what I found hard, this is how I can help you have shortcuts to making it easier for you. Like, that's how we sort of like create change. And I think a lot of, you have like one part of society that pretty much can do, it's not doing that much, but is able to sort of really elevate and make fireworks out of like things happening. And then you have so many people that are working from a grassroots way, and they don't have the technology or the background. Luckily, my background is in graphic design, so I know how to tell my story in a way where people in authority will still value it. I know how to speak that language. And like, it's sort of, I don't necessarily want to do it, but I know you make a beautiful pamphlet about something and people will start understanding what it's about. You get to, but it is about telling your own stories and telling the story of like how you want something to be different. Like, I think at the moment, a lot of us, well, most people are fatigued because it's like you don't actually believe in so many things that are happening around you, the governance of so many things, and we feel disempowered. And I think that's a fallacy. Like, I think it's sort of like we're really in powerful positions. It just doesn't feel like it. Sort of like, and that's the easiest way to get people not to create change, is to feel disempowered.
Agree with all of that. Thanks, Kiran. We have more people with points. So Adam, go ahead.
Hey, Kiran, I just want to say that really, really inspiring hearing you, hearing what you're up to. Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question and maybe just propose something for you. Like, the high street is shutting down, as we know, since things are going online. So there's like a larger at scale, like vacancy of buildings. Now, funnily enough, this is actually a part of something that holds me back. I always think whatever I do, it has to be big.
Yeah, okay.
And what I'm really inspired about from what you've been saying is like, it's like get resourceful from where you are, and the little things that you do really matter to bring people together. So yeah, I was just wondering whether like you see any opportunities with the high street shutting down, essentially. Yeah, I guess I'll just stop there.
No, I think like in terms of, I suppose, we're at the moment, we're going to actually, I have a website, the madeupcollective.com, I think it is, and I haven't done anything on it for like a million years. But it was just to sort of look at the idea of like placemaking from a grassroots lens and how to change spaces. The high street has been dying for like 10 years. And within it now, yeah, there's going to be a huge influx of empty buildings. There are also certain organizations that are already set up that can feed into that really quickly and easily, and developers love them. Anytime you sort of see that sort of like 1950s hand printed sort of like signage suddenly coming up in your neighborhood, like suddenly the chicken shop has got a posh signage, that's a public art project to sort of like activate space. Like, they're the sort of projects I used to like be asked to do. I think they've got it like, if you go down West Green Road, or if you go down, think Walthamstow, the high street, the first thing they've done is change the facade of the space, which I always sort of think, I like how what you think is like a level to reach is a 1950s simple font where everything's sort of like pastel and everything's great. I think in terms of activating buildings, there are huge opportunities. If you look at people like, I don't know what they've called themselves now, but there's a guy who did the green rooms, and he's done the Silver building in Silvertown, and he activates really big buildings and different sort of spaces. Councils love him because he takes something and makes it into nothing. There's also like Space Makers Agency, so they did Brixton, I think, so Brixton Market, and they sort of gentrified this market. And I don't think that was their vision initially. I think the vision was 40% of the stalls weren't being used, so they wanted to give them to people for a year for free, for the idea that then the ones that are succeeding, you started paying rental on them. It just so happened that it was really a middle class solution, so you had a real sort of vibrant market that then suddenly became two separate markets in one place. And I always sort of think, when I look at that, I sort of think, you really missed the point. Like, what you could have done is next door to the butchers, made a restaurant that survives off the butchers. And so if the restaurant succeeds, the butcher succeeds. Next to like the African fabric shop, have a designer who's using that African fabric. And so therefore you're not only sort of meeting different markets, but you're respecting what was already there. And I think, and that's what happens in a lot of spaces. Yeah, that things get erased. I don't think we need any more micro breweries in our town, or sort of like printmaker studios. I do printmaking, but I don't think there's like, and these are the things that get put in place first. And it's good to see, like, I suppose when I observe it, I sort of go, oh, a microbrewery, oh, a printmaking studio, oh, like a shop front, which is asking the community what they want. Like, this in itself is a way to sort of erase people, because it's really just asking one part of the community what it wants. Like, and I suppose in terms of activating new buildings, I think one of the reasons we wanted to take the space in the Royal Docks is it's around a lot of developments. And I think part of people see your value once they see what you can achieve, rather than going up to sort of councils and going, can we do this and can we do that? Not to say that you shouldn't. I think like there's going to be so many spaces that can be got by like hardly any rent. You just have to be audacious.
What I was thinking, Kiran, is like there's obviously people who have been locked up for a long time, buildings are going vacant, and I think coming out of this, there's going to be people going to want to build community, and also the nature of work is changing such that perhaps different leisure lifestyles, such as a different demand or appetite for that, is definitely going to appear. That's what I think anyway. So yeah, I was thinking about the high street because I was thinking about what you're doing and how you could scale that somehow.
I think one of the things I started looking at is having had to do a, what's it called, a business plan, which apparently is not a business plan. Apparently I just made like a vision book or something. Like, having made this sort of like book, I was like, actually, this is an idea of how to do things. When we first did People's Kitchen, I made on the website how to set up your own community kitchen, because you just sort of think there's no point just doing something. Like, make an open source that shows other people how they can do the same thing. I suppose with this, I'm looking at the idea like, yeah, you could go to developers and do stuff. I think this cafe project is going to snowball into something. I just don't know what it is yet, and that's the fun bit of it. It's sort of not knowing what happens next.
Yeah, thank you for sharing and answering my questions. I think we've got quite a few people who want to ask more.
Okay.
Hey, Kiran, I think I'm next. I just like, I feel like I put my hand up to ask a question like 20 minutes ago, and I can't quite remember exactly everything I wanted to say because it was just like so impassioned. I mean, like, firstly, just thanks for like sharing your passion, your vision, and for validating like all the fire that you had inside of you to step into where you are now. And the thing that kind of kept coming up in my mind, when you were speaking, was like, you always referred to your team. You always said we, you never said I. It was always we did this, we did that. And I feel like perhaps you have this kind of like archetype of being the ringleader or the leader and having that drive. But I also know that responsibility doesn't always come from like one person. And like how you said that there was a journey, maybe you're here. I was thinking when you're speaking, like, are there, for example, different archetypes of responsibility where maybe you start off here and then you go to this archetype and this archetype? And the reason I wanted to ask that was because perhaps like people on this call, some of us may resonate with you, but some of us may resonate with like a different capacity for responsibility. Yeah. And so where do we interact? Because we can't all be like
Yeah.
It's like we're a team, you know.
Yeah, I think for me it's sort of like, it's taken me a long journey not to be the person that does everything, not to be like the person that's designing it or leading it or this or that. And I think that comes from like, you learn to be self-sufficient in certain ways and not to ask people of things. But I would say like, okay, so admin, like if you have a good head for admin and logical thinking and placing what other people vision into structural form, into like, you're like a much needed necessity in so many grassroots projects. They don't have it. They don't have people who know how to actually go like, oh, this does here, this is the focus here, this works here. Like it's, and that can be from like sorting out paperwork, sorting out like health and safety stuff. If you're good with numbers, accounting, like also if you're good with people, like good with people is just like that person who works with volunteers, who understands different people's capacity on different days, and how to resonate with what might be great for one person that isn't good for another. Like, because when people volunteer, and I hate the word volunteering, because I just sort of think this idea that you're doing something without money, that it becomes like a name unto itself. Like you're just like, I'm volunteering. It's like, no, you're spending your day with other people, connecting, being of service. Like, but actually we're all supporting each other. That there isn't one person that's being of service. Like there isn't one group that's of service and the other people being served. We're finding ways to connect with each other. So those people are really needed. If you're a graphic designer, oh my gosh, like there are so many grassroots projects that don't know how to brand themselves, don't know how to sort of visualize what they're doing. If you're like more than a filmmaker, if you know how to make beautiful little films, all around London are people doing stuff that nobody knows about, nobody can see, nobody knows how, like, so I suppose it's a framework of different people who can communicate to a wider group as well. And you might not be the person that's building something, like but there are so many people building things that you will resonate with and you will connect with, and you can be very clear in what you have to provide. I think I used to have loads of people turn up and go like, I'd really love to chop food, like I can sort of chop ingredients, and I sort of forget that actually people want to do that because they want to be part of like a meditative sort of flow and to be a really small part of something. And you go like, well, that's great, but like you're a filmmaker, like couldn't you help and like make a film about this project? So it's that idea of like there are lots of different ways, and I think sometimes you just have to go to the space and be in it a bit to start figuring out what you can do and what you can provide in that space. And I would say now more than any other time, there are so many different people that are building in lots of different ways. So it's quite easy to sort of go like, and I think also what nourishes you, like what is it that would make you feel fulfilled? Because within finding that, when you place it in another space, it's only going to flourish, rather than just being like, I want to come and give. It's like, what is it that's unique about you that you can bring to a space?
Thank you. I'll let the next person go.
I think that's me. Thanks so much, Kiran, for everything. I was just gonna, sort of one of the things I thought while you were explaining the value of the different spaces is, as well as like what people can do there or receive from like each other doing it, or all these sorts of things, is also just having that lived experience. I think for a lot of people is not something that would have existed otherwise, and I think there's a truth in there's a truth in knowing what something is by experiencing it that makes it seem far more possible than any kind of like guide or description or other example. And yes, I just think that's like, it's just something I wanted to add. And then also to ask, like, of the people who you've done these things with, have you seen a change in them where they are then going off into like wherever they, like other communities? Have you seen a spread of this sort of like approach?
I think out of the two things, so the first thing about lived experience, what's really funny is up until this year, like there in this country, there wasn't really a value system put onto lived experience of and now it's starting to come out in grants, like, do you have a lived experience? But it's quite a funny concept where they sort of think lived experience is not like multifaceted and multi-layered. When I came onto like speaking today, I was like, oh, how much do you actually tell of yourself to explain to other people? I think sometimes people look at you and they sort of go like, oh, how did you do this thing? I mean, okay, so I grew up with two parents who had mental health issues. So I grew up in instability. I grew up with a sense of chaos and a sense of things always changing, and a sense of actually my over-awareness for space is because from a small age, I was acutely aware of what was happening in the space, because the energy in the space could change at any moment. So from an early age, I was more aware than the people. Is like, what does the space need to balance it out, to have it have more care, have more understanding in it, for people to be heard within it. And I suppose up until now, it's weird, you don't tell your story because it's unveiling other people's story at the same time. So you usually sort of like hold your lived experience really close to yourself. Or some people become like a figurehead, like, oh, I do this because of this. And I've never really wanted, I don't think anybody should be a case study. So I've never wanted myself to be a case study or anybody else. So go, oh, I do this, like, you know, from adversity, then this happened. It's, you just sort of go, actually, everybody around us has different lived experiences that are making them who they are. Sometimes it's good to say it because then you know the journey. Oh, from here, this is why this person is totally overdeveloped in thinking about space and thinking about emotions within it and how to make the space feel better, and also how to make people be heard and to be able to express themselves. So that's my like lived experience. And I would say it doesn't feel like it, but it's your superpower. That's why people like certain songs, because they come from a lived experience and it resonates with you. You sort of go, anytime I've ever said, I think somebody asked me last week, like, how are you doing? And I went, me and anxiety, like, we hang out, we're like best mates. Some days I'm like, what are we going to do today? Like, so it's like once you sort of like are able to sort of like normalize it and put it into metaphors and make it easy, then other people start being able to feel safe enough to go like, oh, actually, me too, I want to tell you this thing. Like, and so suddenly we're not being guarded, we're sort of going, oh, okay, I do this because of this, like this happened to me and now I want to change this. So that's, I suppose that's the like the lived experience part of it. What was your second thing that you were saying?
Whether it had spread, like whether you'd seen it spread directly, like I think someone who's come to the kitchen. Or
I think what happens is you forget how much each one of us is sort of like making marks on other people that spread and spread and spread. And I think sometimes like I can get so contained in this like one space here that it's like you almost don't want to own the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, because actually people came to your space because they were ready. Like people are drawn to something because they're ready. So how much of what happens next it has got to do with the space, or how much has got to do with that person was actually just ready. And so then the next thing they do and the next thing they do, like I have someone who used to come to people's kitchen, and then they ended up changing their career and started to cook for an organization called Roly, and Roly make these beautiful sort of future musical instruments, electronic instruments. And what she does every day is they make keyboards. They're like keyboards that got
Yeah.
So what she does is she feeds everybody every day, and everybody sits at a table and eats together, and that's her job. It's such a great job. So it's like 100 people she gets to sort of like make them dinner, and it's a way for their company to meet at a table at lunch and sort of like connect different departments that might not connect. So she's a really good sort of, there was a guy, it's weird telling people stories. So there's a guy who used to come, and initially he used to always bring a book to read a book. And I used to do that when I was younger. I used to bring a sketch pad. It's a really easy way to disconnect from everyone. So like, I'm part of the group, but like, I don't really want to communicate. So he used to always read his book when he came to people's kitchen. And then after a while, he started washing the dishes. Washing the dishes is a great thing. You get to have your back to everybody else. You're playing an integral part in it all. You don't have to speak to anyone. You are like a linchpin of everything that's going on in the space, because nobody wants to wash dishes. And then if you're the person that wants to do it, like you're making everything flow and run. And then from that, he started leading his own space. I think it's in Popular. It's like a tea rooms, a community tea rooms. And it's just like, yeah, the things that, and I think Passing Clouds in Dalston did that a lot. Lots of people came to it and then built their own things. I'm sure there's just loads of stories everywhere, because actually sometimes all you need is to be part of a space that says you're allowed to think that you can create alternatives. Like, and being there enough makes your weird idea not seem so weird anymore. You just sort of go like, well, this person's doing it, like maybe I can do it.
Thank you.
All right. I feel like asking questions to everybody else. This feels a little bit like therapy. like at the end of a therapy session, I'm like, what about her day? What was her day like? I was like, how's she doing this week? I was like, I'm not used to just being like, my vocation is to make sure to read how everybody else is doing. So I always sort of feel like, oh wow, I wonder how she's doing this week. So it's like, it feels a little bit like that. I might start asking questions back.
I think that would be a great idea. But Alice wanted to speak first. But yeah, I would love for you to ask questions, and because I'm sure they've got like some different and crazy answers. But anyways, I'll let Alice speak.
Oh no, I don't want to speak.
Come on, Alice, you've got such a great name. You must speak. Look, it's like, tell me something.
Okay, but I don't know what to say.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
If you were going to build something, what, you might not be able to say what would it be, but how would you want people to feel within it? Like, if you were going to build something for other people, either what would it be, or how would you want people to connect within it?
It's a floating neighborhood of maybe not more than 500 people.
Okay.
And it's not only floating. There's land, and
Okay.
there's nature. There are roads that connect to many other neighborhoods, and yeah, it's got it doesn't have hundreds of rows of houses, but it has more circular or I mean, it just has the shape that it makes sense. Like it doesn't. It's probably also changing shape. Like
Okay.
not always. Not always in the same place, and that's some of it. That's some of the vision.
It's great. It's a great vision. I would definitely love to inhabit a floating space. I think a lot of us spend too much time on land, and the little times we spend on canal boats, I'm sort of like, what? Life here is so different. You're like, what? I feel like I'm on the undercurrent of society, but a much better version of the world.
Yeah.
It's like, we're chopping wood today. This is what life is about. Like, yeah, I'm in full agreement with you. Any sort of like water, fire experience, I think is much needed by most of us at this moment. I'll happily support you.
Thanks. And thank you for all those beautiful things that you were saying. It was a great stream of consciousness, or what, I don't know what to call it.
No, but I want to now just like, now I know what your space looks like. I'm like, come on guys, what are we building? like
Yeah.
she's got great vision. How do we make it happen?
Maybe I found one place to do it.
Okay.
And I'm going to see it on Thursday. And
Okay.
it's kind of lagoon. It's just really close to here. 1 hour away from where I
Where are you? Where are you? In
Italy, in Tuscany. And
Tuscany. Okay.
That I never think about where I come. Like I never think, oh, it's many years I never thought there'd be any potential here. But there's this massive nature reserve, and where there's horses and 3 not the camels, but the other ones, the ones that have
I know
the dromedari, and there's 3 of them with the horses and lots of birds. And then there's it's connected to the sea with this river, and that's what I need to check, if the river is like you can access the lake from from the sea with the river. And then this lake is a massive lagoon with waterland bits that change, and little weird metal structures that have been built by fishermen, really weird realities, like I don't know, people living in bushes. It's space, and it's kind of really outskirts, like people that don't know where to go, and there's little things like that. But then it's also this nature reserve, and it's kind of touristic little village in one part of it, really small, because it's got Roman ruins and things like that. But then this lake, maybe you can have floating for free on there, and then I need to see if that's possible. And if that's possible,
that's your vision.
Well, it's temporary one, no? It's just
it's a great temporary one. Like I sort of think, like that guy said to me, sometimes the hardest thing is actually people don't have ideas, and it feels like you have a very strong, like, solid idea, and then other people, if you let them, will come in on it and support it. Sort of like, I think that's part of the thing. I mean, I can't see. There's an artist called Swoon, SWOON. She's like my favorite creative of all time. Like anytime I'm feeling a little bit like what, then I just go and sort of watch different things that she's made. And for the Venice Biennale, they made these floating rafts made out of wreckage that they'd found. And I was just like this idea of like, there's an art establishment, and then they just come in with these floating sort of like vessels made out of bits and pieces. And part of it reminded me of this idea of making something out of stuff that other people discard and making it really beautiful. But like, yeah, she is. That's what I thought when you spoke.
I want to check her out. Is that what you're showing us, Karima? Are you showing us?
Yeah, I'm trying to be of service here.
Yeah.
Wait, I'll find you some more. But they look insane.
Like, but Swoon made all, like, she makes she's an artist activist. So she started off making stuff which was initially paper cutouts of people, and they would be put out on the street and they would sort of disappear, and then that turned into going a mile radius and picking up all the junk and making beautiful sort of structures. So she makes these massive gallery structures, and then she started responding to things. So yeah, so that's they're like proper magical, like, and then she started responding to issues. So she made these musical houses in New Orleans, which
Hazel, is that a model for it?
Yeah, that you could walk in and through. And then the stuff happened in Haiti, and she started building these houses, and they're made out of, I think they're made out of like sandbags or clay bags. I think what I really love about her is that sort of sense of vision, making things where nobody else makes them. And like, I suppose when you're talking about those flat floating houses, I think now is the time to have mad ideas. Like, they're allowed, because it's sort of like school's out. School is literally out. So all structure that was placed upon us is sort of like collapsing. I know at some point it will be forced right back into place, but I don't think that there's a possibility after you've given people a year out where you've sort of gone, half of society is just being paid to do nothing, that you can go back to sort of going, we don't really have much money for this, we can't do this, or this isn't allowed. You sort of go, oh, all of this is made up. So if this is made up, I can make up my own thing too. Like, this is all fake structures. I can make up my own stuff. Yeah.
It's really difficult to have a normal conversation online. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's really, I don't know. I think that's what stops me from talking sometimes, because it's like, I don't know. It feels formal, even if it's.
Yeah. I mean, I have pretty much the whole year done hardly any Zoom interactions. Like, I just sort of think it feels a little bit like you can't really read the space or people or each other. So what you're doing is you're the loud person at the party.
Yeah.
Like, so everybody is like the loud person at the party. Like, you
have to be so confident that what I'm saying is what people want to hear, and I don't know. You can't hear that. You can't see the eyes or the nodding or the keep going or that's not really interesting. And then maybe I'll pass it on to someone else. You don't know. And
you can't read the cues. So it's just that sort of thing of like, but then I sort of think, if this is all we have at this moment, then it's finding spaces like this where you're allowed to just float a bit, like, and there isn't this sense of, I think initially when I was talking, I was like, wow, this is really weird. It is like just a random monologue, like going blah, 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 blah. And you sort of go like, who are these people? And what did, like, when you started telling me about the floating thing, I was like, oh, okay, everyone else, I want to know what your visions are. Because the thing is, once you know other people's visions, then you know where things cross over, and you know how to sort of support each other. Because I think that's what we need more than anything at this time, is this sort of like sense of like, you're not alone in believing something or wanting to do something, and it's not a crazy idea. It's actually the most valuable idea. like, and the more we all support each other and go like, cool, I want to see how I can help your idea, or I want to see what happens next, or show you something, or like,
yeah. Well, if you have, any of you have a way to get out of England and go to south of France, you can come and stay with me and live in the boat and fix a boat for a bit. That's how I have an opportunity to ask.
I was like halfway through, I was like, she lives on the boat. So she wants a floating world. She's already there.
Yeah. But then the other thing you said that was really interesting just now, that when you don't know how to read, if you can't read the space, if you can't read very well what the other people, who the other people are, who are you talking to, then it's the same as if you need to know this where you are. You need to understand where you are to use the space in the best way, or give and take, and like to activate the space in the way you think is respectful to what was there before,
and to figure out sort of like how to support other people in the space. It's sort of like, I remember somebody came to our university when I was studying illustration, and it was like an illustrator, and he sort of went, it took me 6 years to be able to like financially like just illustration. And I switched off because I was 21 and I was just like, 6 years ago, I was 15. Like, I haven't got 6 years of my life to sort of like, so he basically started at a point that I couldn't resonate with. I was like, no. And like, when you're sort of in your early 20s, there is this beautiful sort of like sense that anything can be achieved. And that I just sort of like batted him to one side. I was just like, no, you've nothing to tell me. And like my adult self, I remember doing talks at universities where I just sort of went, I need to tell people what I did in my own 6 years before I got to be able to do this properly, just so you can find shortcuts to the thing. So that's part of reading the space. It's like, is there something I can tell you, or is there something you can tell me that makes it easier for me to achieve the sort of things I'd want to achieve?
Yeah.
I would say to you personally, I 100% want you to build a floating well. Like, I can see it. It's not that complicated. Like, I think you just start with a little bit of it, and other people will come with their parts of it. Like, I think that's sometimes you forget that actually other people connect with you and they can come and build their own little part of something. You just have to bring the idea to life. That's the hardest bit, is being the person who knows how to bring the first bit of the idea to life. But you live on a boat, life is already good. Anybody else want to tell me what they want to build?
I had a little exclamation mark a while ago. I'll jump in. But yeah, I was quite impassioned when I put that exclamation mark. But but yeah, Alicia, that land will appear to me somewhere in my dreams. It sounds like a place people need to see. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Kiran, for being here and sharing everything that you said. And yeah, I didn't really have any questions as such. It was just like a few points. And again, like most recently, what you said about like what do you want to build? I guess it kind of relates to that and my little bubble to an extent. But like some of the things that really highlighted was just the you're talking about the teacher-student relationship and how maybe that should be like a more of a fluid thing. I thought was just so interesting, because it really does relate to that kind of idea of kind of who does kind of get to dictate and say kind of, you know, what is happening and stuff. And I think, you know, even though you have maybe, I don't know, experience and skill from a teacher, I think someone like younger is living in the world as it's kind of evolving and shaping right now, and I think they're a lot fresher and more attuned to a lot of the things going on. So I think kind of that sort of, I don't know, that reconfiguration that applies to everything all over the world, really, kind of just kind of, yeah, sort of everyone's view is kind of working like in harmony, like regardless. And I thought that was something like really, yeah, really powerful, and sort of like shifted my perspective a little bit. But as well, like the way you bring that into kind of like food and community and how everyone is finding their own place, it's just yeah, it's really nice. I'll see if I made a couple notes. I think a bit lost. But yeah, no, it was, but yeah, I think ultimately it was just the comment on that, really. But I also found it quite interesting from like a filmmaking background as well, kind of as sort of a crew or someone that's making something, kind of if you're kind of portraying kind of a community or a people or a subject, then sort of how do you work together to kind of establish sort of a common ground where you're kind of giving, you know, a reciprocating agency to what you're making. And yeah, it's just like a lot of food for thought. But thank you. And I wanted to ask as well, I think you mentioned like a website or something, but I wonder if there's somewhere where we can kind of stay up to date with what you're doing.
So like, there's Instagram, which is like Made Up Kitchen, which sort of shows the stuff we're doing at the moment. I have a website called the madeupcollective.com, which is soon going to change, hopefully by its own self. It will. But it's sort of like the reason I came up with Made Up was this undervalued thing of making things up as you go along, being responsive. We live in a society where everybody wants everything to be visualized and sort of shown like this is exactly what it's going to look like, and you just sort of go, well, this picture has nobody else's opinions in it apart from me. Like, so like that, why should it look like just what I want it to look like? So having responsive solutions to mostly like social issues, and made up is like a certain feeling as well. You're feeling made up, feeling like what sort of things do you film?
It's a real mix, really. But I do love kind of documentary work, and yeah, it's sort of, it's a weird one because I'm doing like a lot of kind of like reading at the moment from different kind of like anthropologists and kind of documentary makers. But in terms of kind of how sort of a lot of kind of the established kind of formalities of documentary making, kind of quite sort of straightforward formal modes of kind of relaying information, sort of is not really in tune to like the sensory or the material world, and kind of how that can, so it's kind of, I don't know, whatever film is kind of like investing in that capacity to kind of like, I don't know, share things in a, I don't know, it's kind of like anything along that's quite abstract, but it's kind of it's that kind of thing, sort of bridging the gap between documentary fiction, but like how do you kind of build it, you know, fulfill a capacity and kind of that sort of thing.
James, can we do a thing that like where we have like all like different people can send links to like a and we can look at like not just like the thing you make, but the things that inspire you. Like I sort of think food really inspires me, like just maybe just 5 things, like 2 things that you make and like 3 things that have inspired you this week. For me it would just be like one song, a particular like website. Like I just thought like there's something in sort of like everything I get sent lately is quite sort of doom laden. So it'd be really lovely to have things which we send each other, which is like this person's really inspiring, or this way of looking at something. Like, because you were telling me about your the guy before was telling me about the documentary making, and I was like, oh, I want to see the sort of thing, not even just like what inspires you, what sort of things you connect with.
Yeah, I think it's really important to like add layers to experience and different senses, different colors that exists within just one word, or just one topic, and just like expand on it and add layers and context to it. Even because I think sometimes in the digital we keep taking the context out and out and out. Like so perhaps on a vinyl you may get like this studio at this time or whatever. Then on a CD, it's just like the record label and maybe I don't know. And then on digital, it's like you've got to dig to find out where is this coming from. I'm using mixed analogies, but the short answer is there is a Telegraph link that I've created where people can add stuff. People could just message me privately any links now, or it's a Telegraph link, so we could put it in there. I didn't want to like overload people.
No, totally. But I was just, for me, it was just like, I think asking people what they would like to build is a really nice, it felt nice, and the answer felt really stunning. So I was just sort of like, I want to know. This is like, I want to go around people and sort of like, especially when people like, you're drawn to something, so then you yourself have visions of what you want to build. So in my brain I was like, this would have been a much better thing if I could just like, not that like, because like for me I'd be like, what do you want to build? Like, you're already building the sort of things you want to build. Like, this space is one of the things you want to build. So like,
I'm really interested in taking like the corner shop model and turning it into like mixed creative spaces of like filmmakers, editors next to biochemists, like really startup kids in an abandoned corner store where like there isn't spaces or boxes in between them. They're just over on top of each other, and anyone can come in, and like a younger kid is like looking over an older kid doing something. And if you could imagine a kid hovering over the kind of the person doing like biochemical stuff, and then film, and then someone in front of a garage band like making music, or just, and that kid's going to leave that space with all of that
learning,
all of that, that is one thing that comes to mind. I just love adding layers and layers to the richness, and just not figuring one thing out so much, just like going through them and then going through them like that.
I mean, we can definitely do a corner shop. There's so many shops that the world is going to be your oyster. There's like empty shops everywhere. You can find a shop to do this in. I always think, like, when you were talking, next to where I live in Dalbney Fields, there's a skateboard park called the Bumps, and when I walk past there, I just sort of think, this is what school should be like. Like, you're in a space where you're 8 and you're just learning the first things, and around you are all different stages of learning. So all around you, you see aspiration. You're like, I could be you, I could be like, I can. And when I walk past there, I always have this longing as like a grown-up. I'm like, I wish I could skateboard, because this looks like the life. Like, this is actually a space which is cross-generational. And like, and now lately I see lots of more like little girls as well. Anytime I walk past a little girl who's like 8 or 9 who's skateboarding, I just sort of go like, I just like to tell you officially, you're really cool. Like, I'm proper impressed. You're 8 and you know how to skateboard. So I suppose what you're saying is those spaces where you can learn in a way that is more fluid, that by just being in a space where other people are doing stuff, that you'll want to learn.
And and a layer to that is, imagine like the same version of that in Hackney and then another version in Shoreditch, and they're not the same. They're totally different. They would have totally different people. You'd walk in, and before you even saw anything, you could feel what this space is like. And maybe people would have conversations with each other saying, oh, you're from that kind of space. They're really good at the music. And then this side is really good at the other thing. And you could be known, like, imagine like in the future, it's like, we're the filmmaking part of this town and that town. I think
the funny thing is, like, okay, so there's this organization in Barking called Everyone Every Day. This woman, what is her name? Her name sort of like, basically she has, I want to say her name is Britty something, but like, what she's done is taken a very simple model, which is this concept, like almost like you've said, like taking up spaces, but like running different workshops in them, this and this and this and this and this is happening. And then she made a maker space, which was like a kitchen, which the idea that people can come and they can set up their own businesses, or a maker space, or I suppose a good way to look at that person is like, I don't think anything that she's doing, it has any great sort of like uniqueness to it. It's pretty bog standard, like in my personal opinion, but truckloads of money get thrown at this because this woman and her organization, which I think they're called something, it's called something city, they can quantify everything and they can document everything. So they do like 100-page sort of like talking about micro neighborhoods, and like they've got all the buzzwords and they have all these visualizations and it pans out and everything's growing, and like, and I look at this and I just sort of think, this is what this country is about. You just have to be the people who can speak a language of quantification of value, and then suddenly like you, and to be of a certain standing, and suddenly money gets given to you as if like what you're doing is great, when actually like between what the three of you have said, it's like way more complex and way more sort of like nourishing as ideas and concepts. But I just thought about it, everyone every day, like, not that it's not great what they're doing. I mean, they get millions, they're getting millions of pounds to do what they're doing, but it's good to look at how people in authority are able to access money because they're able to explain their ideas in a way that people who aren't creative see value in them.
It's like speaking fluent bureaucrat.
Yeah.
It's their language.
Yeah, like, and but I mean, at some point it's like you either do, I suppose what's great about new generations understand that you can make things without actually having to interact with authority. Like, you just sort of go like, you have no idea what the future is going to be like, so I'm going to discard you, and I'm making this thing over here, and this is how I'm going to publicize it, and this is how I'm going to get other people on board, and like that's how I'm going to get things to happen. Yeah, so it's like, I suppose I still come from a generation which are trying to be validated in a way of like, can you see value in what I'm doing? Like, do I have to make a good like little short film about it before you see that's of value?
Kiran, there was, well, your whole the whole conversation has been like incredible, really inspiring, so thank you. The few things you said, when you said like the space, your website's called the Made Up Collective, and you related that to like, because you don't have having a prefigured notion of like how everything's going to look is like, so you're kind of improvising. It resonated with what you said about when you set up spaces, everyone kind of has a roles, but they kind of mesh, but you don't really know what they're going to be, but you're kind of, until you get there and spend some time there, and they're kind of in conversation with each other, and it's not like that, it's kind of like that, as you did with your hands. It all reminds me of like, resonates with like how, I've mentioned this before, so people probably laugh, like how jazz bands improvise with each other. And it weirdly full circle, I'm pretty sure I've eaten your food a few times at Church of Sound, but I had no idea it was you. And yeah, I just wondered, like, you sort of answered it as well, but like, where do you look? You said food really inspires and nourishes you just now when I was like queuing up to ask this. I was like, oh, but it's like, where do you go for like, not where do you go, but like, and you said you were listening to one song loads and that was really inspiring you, but I didn't know what it was. But I think, where do you go for that nourishment? Like, you mentioned that artist and that song, but I just wondered, like, as well as all the amazing things you do.
Where I go for nourishment is usually, I used to go to jams. I used to go to jams for nourishment because I really love singing. And what I love about jams is this idea of chaos. it's a space where, like, if you go to a good jam, as in not somewhere where like all the band know each other and somebody's just coming to sing. If you go somewhere where like there is space to just randomly be, like, as someone who's trying to create order in chaos but actually enjoys chaos as well, like, jams have this point where like there's a little moment where everybody knows that they're synced and they're like, shit, okay. And then what happens is it sort of like dissipates and like suddenly everything is just a little bit off again. And I just love that. I love that there's a moment where everybody is so connected that they can feel it. And there's one person leading, like sometimes it's the drummer or sometimes it's the bassist or sometimes nobody knows who the leader is and you're just randomly playing hoping somebody will be the leader. And like rarely, but once in a while it's the singer, but then the singer's usually got the least musicality, so sometimes the singer just doesn't know when to stop and let other people breathe in the space. So I suppose to me, when you say like before the lockdown jams, I used to go to a space called The Others in Stoke Newington, which a lot of people have different feelings about, but I quite like the sort of like the disorder of it. So yeah, music. The reason I got into Church of Sound was just by chance. I was doing some stuff in an adventure playground, and I was doing some food workshops and I helped them, and then I had lots of food left over. I lived in the warehouses and I was like, oh, maybe I can sell this food in the warehouses and make more money for the adventure playground. And then a friend called me and he was going to be doing something at the Total Refreshment Centre. And he was like, do you want to pop down? And I went, I actually got all this food I need to get rid of. And he was like, cool, just sell it at Total Refreshment Centre. So I just went out down that evening, and then Lex sort of said to me, do you want to do this next week? And I was like, I don't really do this. I don't know what this is, but I don't do it. And he goes, it's just pretty much what you did now, and you just do it again. And then he sort of went, I'm opening this thing called Church of Sound. Do you want to do the food for it? And you can make the money from that will go towards this adventure playground. And I was like, this would be a really easy way to do this. So I inadvertently got into doing catering off the back of trying to support a space. But like, yeah, what nourishes me is music and randomly making music up and being in spaces. Dancing. Food is like anywhere that like a group of people are allowed to float in and out of things. Like, I suppose one of my close friends set up Steam Down, and so it was that thing of like a space where it's more circular, so people are responding to each other. I'm not very good in linear spaces where it's like it's a set thing, you observe, the other people do. Like, I sort of think, haven't we moved on from there? I'm like, have we moved on from this sort of way of being? Can we have more spaces where it's like it's in circles?
It reminds me as well, just quickly as well, is like of like sound system things like Jashaka and stuff. Like, and people are always, I bring people to Jashaka, not that like I'm the reason they go, like we go together and they're like, oh my god, there's this amazing food here, and like you can get a tea at 5 a.m. and it's like you said as well, it's an intergenerational space. Like not one of the only things, but sometimes I'm there at like 5:30 and I'm knackered and I see a bunch of nanas by the barrier. They're like fine, and I'm like, it's amazing how like it's a non-linear space. Like the speakers are around you instead of you're just watching it happen, and the way people are kind of interacting with each other is like very different to going to watch like a band. And it's like, it reminds me of Steam Down, but obviously like very different. But again, how food is like a really key part of, and if the food's never not there at Jashaka because the venue won't let them, everyone's so grumpy and everyone's like, oh, will you let us out and back in with our stamp? We need to go get something to eat. And they're asking for the person who makes the food by name because it's the same person every time. And it's I'm just like, and he's been doing it for like 40 years, and I'm just like, it's amazing when that is it's just like a very powerful like way of like you said, like making a space differently. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think to me, like with Church of Sound, the fact that it's in a circle, you get to actually like, if you love music, you actually get to experience a drummer. Like you get to actually like be in the space, like, because drummers, like, you have a stage and then they're behind a drum kit, and then what they're doing you're not really seeing. So suddenly you get to, and for me, making food there, initially we used to cook in the church itself, which was great. So people were just doing sound checks and then we would sort of be cooking the space. I just really love this idea that like everybody in the room like has eaten your food and then they're experiencing this music. There's something about it which feels really communal, and you're just sort of going like, oh, this is a really beautiful concept. Like if you look at it in a way which isn't, because I don't look at it away from being a caterer, like I just look at it away from connection, and I was like, oh, I make this thing and I'm giving it to you, and now it's like within you, and now the music is within you, and we're all sort of like, I love Church of Sound. It's pretty great.
Thank you. That was great. Alice, you put a little exclamation mark in. Go for it.
Yeah, it's related to what you were both saying, and it's so disorder, chaos, and like variety. It's places where, you said it was a nice way to say it, a group of people are allowed to float in and out. So basically a place where there is, we are allowed to move. Space and meet and come together and detach and come. It's really fluid. Fluid is a good word for that. And in these spaces of chaos, to create spaces of where chaos is accessible.
Yeah.
And to have space for all this variety, and to trust that variety is good and will bring good. You need all of this. I mean, it's like order is trying to protect us from possible damage that the variety can bring. But why? I mean, it's true. A lot of the chaos gets into degradation. But what I find really, really interesting in, again, like you're saying, in jams or in dancing or in basic community sort of dynamics, but house, like families, friends, all kinds of groups, is to observe what are the dynamics and what are the structures that are keeping these dynamics in place, and what is that formula that makes it, I guess, safe for a space to be variety, chaos, everything, and that formula is an interesting place of like, you need a structure. I feel like there is
you need structure
of a structure.
Yeah.
That structure, you can have so much, or there's a scale of it, and that how much structure you put in place, so how you make the space, how you set the space up with this structure, is enabling this or that. And so it's the search for the minimum structure that keeps enough
I think
safety.
For me, it's like, who are the guardians of the space? It's sort of like, I grew up in an element of chaos, so like sometimes my spaces can feel like there's an organized chaos, but actually what I've done is, as an overthinker, I've thought of a million different things that could happen. And so like, if the glass comes to the edge of the table, I'm always going to be there before it falls, but I'm going to wait for somebody else first to see if they can see that the glass is at the edge of the table. So it's sort of like, who are the guardians of the space? And then who comes next into the space, which holds the identity of the space? It's really important. I remember going to a night called Steez in London, and I remember the first time going to it, somebody said to me, "This is the first time you've been to Steez?" And I was like, yeah. And they were like, oh, I'm almost jealous, because you get to feel how this feels. And what was great, like Steez was just astounding. What was great about it was they started off with like a space jam. So you started off with this idea of like really spacey music. They would have, so the musicians are holding the space, and they would let people come in and spend a few minutes in that space. So you could be creating something that's disorder, but everything is held within it, and then you leave, and then they'd have somebody who's a known person that would be in the space. So it would like, everything would balance out. So you were allowed to exist in it, but you're not going to cause total disorder in it. It's being held. And then what would happen is that would move on to elements of poetry, and then it'd be a band that was just one or two people, and then it'd be a huge band. So the night would build, and everybody who went to that night, who nobody was an observer of the night, everybody was a performer in the night. So like if you're dancing in the space, and it was the only space I've ever been to where they had a jam set up upstairs that nobody organized. So you just would go there, and you'd have moments where like the most brilliantest thing is happening, and somebody's holding space, and 50 people are sitting down, and it's quiet, and they're just listening. And then you go at other moments where there would just be this biggest racket, and people are there. There's certain people, and you can see like the people are being impacting, and you sort of going like, oh, at some point you're going to try to cause order in this, but like we're still allowed to sort of be. So I suppose it's sort of like, who are the guardians of the space that get it to remain safe, and who gets to say who's allowed to sort of let their voices be heard next. And yeah, but yeah, I remember Steve's long will it be missed.
I love that idea of co-creating something using kind of the nuances, or the kind of, I don't want to use the word imperfections because that implies that this idea of perfection, but
yeah,
the nuances, or the kind of idiosyncrasies that come with each person, that kind of then creates that music. I think we can start wrapping this up, but before we get around to it, just continuing from last week's idea, if we can all just go around, saying one word that comes to mind through, this whole conversation, or just in your day, it can be something that's just as random. You don't have to think it through as much. So yeah, the only rules are don't think it through as much. And if you said something, or if you thought of something that someone else said, feel free to repeat it, because in the end, it's more about the thought that came to you than the uniqueness of it. So yeah, if we can go, and yeah, so just say it and then pass it on to the next person. I'm going to start with Felix.
I just had a feeling it would come to me soon. I think the word that came to mind for me was we, like WE, like group I. So that's my one. And yeah, and there are a lot of ones, but I feel like it'd be unfair to take them away like that. So I think I'll pass on to Adam. Thanks.
Thanks, Felix. I'm trying to decide between two words here. Like, I'm really impressed by Kiran's immediacy, like to the moment. Like, there's a crisis, let's act. Like, whereas I kind of feel like I'm paralyzed by thinking about what to do. And a second, if I may, resourcefulness, like staggering amounts of resourcefulness that is really inspiring. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And to who, Adam?
Yeah, let's go with Alice.
I don't know, I'm happy. I really enjoyed it. I came really tired, and I don't know what word to use. I'm just numbed and happy. Thank you. And I pass it on to James.
Yeah, there's just this like flame But the first word that came to mind was complexify. So I don't know if I'm taking 2 words there, but complexify.
I feel like we're all doing 2 words now, so
go for it. We could.
I think it's 2 words.
Complexify, yeah, complexify comes up for me, definitely. Yeah. I'll pass it on to Carlotta.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Because this is the first time.
Yeah.
So this is my first time here, if you haven't noticed. But yeah, like the word that just popped into my head is like jump and fall, because that is the feeling that I have right now that you've all given me. That it's like, it's kind of like when you jump into something new and you're in the air and you're filled with all of this energy, and like you're just super motivated, but at the same time you're really scared. You're midair, and there's a lot of things that you have to process, and I'm really happy about it. I'm really grateful. So yeah, thanks for inviting me, Sim. And I'll pass it on to Esther.
Hi, one word. I think I think I don't know. I guess within yourself, in terms of being able to give, or knowing what nourishment you need. I think gaps within. There's a lot to take in. It was really nice to hear a lot of what you've said today, and I think I'm not in a very like verbal communicative mood, but yeah, I think my word is gaps, and I'm not sure how to communicate why, but
no, it's a good word. It's a great word.
Oh, and I'm gonna pass it on to Krish.
Hey, I've like been dipping in it, but like in the parts that I've kind of like listened to, like the one kind of anecdote that I really enjoyed was you mentioned this like painting thing in barking.
Yeah.
And like the words that come to mind are like, one, like a sensitivity to like the unacknowledged or like unrealized like desires and needs that people have in the area. Like I think like people couldn't articulate like kind of the need for what you did, but you could kind of sense it. And I think like the other word is agency, because like I think it's one thing to be like aware of those things, it's another thing to then like act on it and like produce something of consequence. So yeah, those are my 2 words. Do I have to pass it on to someone else?
Yeah, otherwise we're just going to watch you. It'll be
Sorry,
quite
my bad.
It was quite interesting to watch. I have to be fair. No good framing to it. I think Josh might be the last person.
Okay. I will go for listening. Yeah. And that's it.
Kiran, do you have a word or words?
I think my words are visioning. It's a really important word to me. It's to be able to envision and vision something. And then community is a word that's very strong for me in general. It's like how to create together.
All right, so the words we have are we, immediacy / resourcefulness, numbed, happy, flame, complexify, jump and fall, gaps / nourishment, sensitivity to the unacknowledged, listening, envisioning, or community, and then my word, co-creation. Think about these, Kiran.
I feel like, yeah, let's do it, guys. Let's build. What are we doing? What are we doing? Who's in? What is the thing? Like, let's come on. Yeah, that's how I feel about these things. I can see how I don't do these talks now. I'm like, right, guys, so when are we doing the thing? Whatever the thing is. My brain is just sort of like, what are we, come on, let's do this. Yeah, it's like the cheerleader in me is sort of like fully on board.
Yeah, it's that immediacy / resourcefulness getting activated.
Yeah, that's sort of going like, I think it's also being around people and just hearing their concepts or at the beginning of ideas or stuff. There's a real beauty in that, because in the newness of it really needs to be looked after. When you vision something, you really need to know where to show it, because people will trample over it, and a lot of people like and you just really don't need that. Like, we don't need any more, like, you just actually need other people to sort of go like, oh, this is really great, that bit's great, what's happening over there, like what's going to happen when you do that? So it's sort of like when you're visioning things, to take them to spaces where they can be nurtured, and to understand the importance of that, and not to take your visions to spaces where people like it's so easy to be the person that sort of goes like, how are you going to do this? I don't think you can do it properly, like, because like anybody can be that person, like, so just I don't like, it's sort of going like, visioning things. It's great.
Helpful critic.
The person that goes like, have you thought about doing this? And you're like, oh, why are you doing? You're sort of going like, why don't you just, it's not like, it's already exhausting enough to sort of like look after my vision without this constant sort of like, do you need to like, have you thought, like, no, I haven't thought about everything, because guess what? It's just going to grow. The plant doesn't think about where it's next going to grow its branch. It just grows the branch. So, yeah.
There's also a level of intuition, right? Like it has, it's coded.
It's that trust in the variety, in the chaos.
Yeah. Also, it's the trust in your fear. Like, I think a lot of us sort of think, like, I think somebody was saying about that sort of like jumping and falling. You sort of think like, other people tell you their stuff that they've done, and they don't tell you they were petrified. I'm petrified most of the time. Like, I'm sort of like, there's like a voice in me that sort of goes, there is no chance this happening. You've got no idea, blah, blah. Like, that's okay. All you need to do is just sort of like mute the voice a little bit and let the other voice that intuitively potters and flows and creates just be. Let it just sort of breathe a little bit. And like, understand that most people who are doing stuff, like whatever they're showing to you that's happening, most of the time there is a voice inside you that sort of goes like, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah. If only there was a mute button for that voice, right? Like Zoom has one.
Yeah, so I'm going, I've got no idea what you're doing. Usually the worst thing is when you have that voice inside you, you'll then draw towards people who'll be that external voice as well. So, or when you're like really exhausted and you want to say to someone, I have no idea how to do this, that person will go, don't worry, you always do it, so you'll be fine. You're like, that's sort of like disregarding that actually it feels like it's impossible, and I just need a little safe space to sort of for somebody to like understand that a lot of the time it does feel like it's going to be impossible to do, but just find people, get drawn towards people who support you and help you in seeing the beauty of your visions.
Wow. All right, so let's wrap this up.
Oh, sorry, can we have another edition of how to keep in touch with everybody maybe in the Telegram, whoever is in the group, everybody, I mean, who doesn't want to doesn't have to, but it would be really nice if
yeah. Yeah, everyone, please email me. I mean, direct message me right now, just so I have you, because yeah, in an email, and then I could email everyone the Telegraph link. That would be the easiest way. And yeah, as time evolves, we'll figure out what works best as a mode. For now, Telegram works good because even if you don't have the app, you can just drop it into a browser and you can see everything that's posted. So you can open up the videos and voice notes. If people want to send voice notes, that would be amazing. If we had a collection of different voice notes, I was like, oh, I thought about this and then that. Yeah.
Is it Telegram or is it Telegram? Because I think Telegram is one of those apps that ensure privacy or something. Like it's
yeah. I think it is Telegram. If someone wants to correct, yeah, Telegram definitely.
And is it just like a group messaging board?
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like, yeah, it's a group messaging board. It can be like an open group, or it can be just like a board where we message things onto it. So instead of it, yeah, so the way I'm thinking about it is a lot of apps, like they keep pinging at you. So like someone could be writing something really beautiful, but then it's just going to come into your phone as a bing. And like in group chats, it's just like, it's not someone's voice or constructed message, it's just a bing at people. So that's something that I'm aware of, like with just starting up a WhatsApp group. So yeah, I kind of want to look after people's attention spans. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So yeah, let's wrap this up with a moment of quiet. If you guys can unmute, so we can all be in each other's sound presence. And take a minute just to kind of let all of this sink in, to ground yourself as well. And I personally find myself just breathing out a sigh of relief at having these conversations. Thank you. And we'll see you guys next Tuesday. Thanks again, Kiran, for lending your amazing presence. I mean, you've already seen it through the chat, but people have been inspired, and it's genuinely something that lights that flame, that fire that you're talking about in a country where we're all told to be water, like you said.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you everyone. It's been really pleasuresome. Like, I didn't think Zoom had this capability. I've been anti-Zooming, but this is pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks.
See you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye everyone. Have a nice
Bye, guys.
time.